Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us once again on the State of Freedom.
The State of Freedom is a listener-supported podcast. We're committed to pursuing the truth about policymaking, decisions, and situations in Louisiana and at the national level that stand to impact our freedoms.
Please become a monthly supporter of the State of Freedom at freedomstate.us as we continue to expand the voice of liberty across Louisiana and beyond.
The secret to losing weight 2 times faster has gone viral. See the transformations hundreds of thousands of men, women, and teens are experiencing around the world with the Slender Eyes drops. These homeopathic hormone-balancing drops are proven to control appetite, support thyroid function, improve energy, boost mood, and increase metabolic rate. To learn more about the drops or other incredible natural wellness and lifestyle products, email me at danielle@freedomstate.us or visit the Shop Our Partners page at freedomstate.us. Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the State of Freedom. My name is Danielle Walker. It's Thursday, September 9th at 10 a.m. Central. I'm joined by my good friend and co-host, Chris Alexander. You might see that I'm out of my normal place. I'm house sitting right now.
Is today Thursday?
No, it's Tuesday. You're right. Did I say
Thursday?
I
was saying, Lord, I thought I was wrong
ahead.
Once again on the day. I'm like, Lord, where'd Tuesday and Wednesday go?
All right. We'll get it figured out. It's Tuesday. We're coming to you live on Voice of the People USA TV and radio network, on Rumble, X, YouTube, and Facebook. Wherever you're watching, please give us a like, a thumbs up, and a share. It helps us with the algorithms. It helps us gain visibility. Comment in the chat. We love hearing your thoughts. We want to know where you're coming from. We want to know where you're listening from today. Well, joining us today is Draza Smith. She is a computer engineer and an electrical engineer who's done extensive statistical analysis of the 2020 election and many elections since then, finding evidence of algorithmic election fraud. And we know she's well over the target because of all the nasty articles written about her and her election denialism. Draza, welcome to the show. It's such an honor to have you with us here today.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
You are most welcome. Well, look, we love to frame out the show with a scripture. And let me see, I actually have my Bible here. Y'all, I'm so out of sorts being out of place this morning, so just bear with me. I'll get it together. But the scripture today is from Hebrews. It's chapter 1, and it's verses 8 through 9. And it says, about his son, he called him God, saying, your throne, O God, endures forever and ever, and you will rule your kingdom with justice and righteousness. For you have cherished righteousness and detested lawlessness. For this reason, God, your God, has anointed you and poured out the oil of bliss on you more than any of your friends. And for a lot of things on the national level, the state level, and even on our personal lives level, it seems like justice can be slow in coming, but our God is a God of justice, and the foundations of his throne are righteousness and justice. And the scriptures tells us that he hates injustice and he detests a false witness. The Psalms tell us that he will judge the upstart and the wicked judges, and they will have no higher authority to appeal to when the day comes. So I believe we're on the cusp of seeing justice in the earth. I don't think that all justice is reserved for the sweet by and by, for the afterlife. I believe that we will see plenty of it here on earth with our physical eyes. Be encouraged, because nothing is escaping the attention of the Lord, who is truth and who is justice. Our job is to keep praying it in, to keep doing the work the Lord has put in our hands, and to keep declaring the truth in the meantime.
That's so beautiful, Danielle. And I love the expression. I love the phrase, the oil of bliss.
I know.
And imagine, think about it. We always tend to associate our peace, our joy, our happiness with results. Americans tend to be very results oriented, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, but we're supposed to be able to enjoy the oil of bliss even during the process of work, even while we are moving toward our victory, which we know we will have if we continue to work, but to be blissful in the process and to try to be content in the moment is the real challenge of the day, and not let any external circumstance dictate how we are in relation to God. Because that is an intrinsic relationship based on our intrinsic value to Him, not on any particular results. We want the
Yeah.
results, don't get me wrong, but we have to remember that we need the oil of bliss even as we wait and work.
Yeah. I love that, Chris.
Yeah. And speaking of someone who has worked and seems to be perpetually blissful, at least as far as my observation, and just a delightful human being, is Draza Smith, truly one of the gurus when it comes to election security as it relates to these electronic voting systems. Draza, it is such a pleasure to have you with us on the State of Freedom today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. Really, really.
Yeah.
I've looked over the people you've had on your show discussing election integrity and all of the work, and you just have such amazing people that you've talked to that are providing people information on what's going on and the right path for the future. And I'm honored to be among the guests that are speaking on the topic.
It's great to add you to the list of renowned and prominent guests that we've had on the State of Freedom. You know, Draza, one of the tired, hackneyed refrains that we get from people who believe in the established election system in the United States is that anybody who opposes that system is somehow an uninformed uh, conspiracy theorist, unqualified to wade into this esoteric subject matter. Certainly, that does not describe you. You're eminently qualified and you've been studying these issues for a long time. But for the benefit of our listeners and perhaps other naysayers, what is your background that you think qualifies you to be able to study this with authority?
Okay, so I have two master's degrees. One's in electrical engineering and one's in computer engineering. The computer engineering master's I received during my PhD studies because I went back to college for my PhD, and the area that I focus on, which is industrial control systems, had moved out of electrical engineering and computer engineering. So, since my PhD was in computer engineering, I received a second master's degree, and then I made it all the way through my PhD studies, and I still have my dissertation to do. Maybe one day, maybe not.
So you're
We'll
almost
see.
Dr. Smith?
Almost, almost.
So
Um, yeah,
you've done all the work. You just don't have the prize.
I just don't have the prize. Yes, it was a culmination of several things. My advisor came down with cancer when I was ready to
Oh,
start my dissertation, and some other things happened financially. So it was just better to leave and go to industry and start getting a paycheck for a while, and maybe I'll go back and finish it up. Uh,
Yeah.
but so I've done an awful lot of schooling in the area of control systems. I've worked in industry in the power sector for many years, and I have about 7 patents now in control strategies for mostly gas turbines that are for controlling emissions, controlling
Wow.
performance, and those are the
Draza,
ones
let
that
me
I'm
say
the.
this real quick. I have to tell you real quick. That blows me away. 7 patents. Getting one patent approved by the Federal Patent Office is a gargantuan feat. And you have 7 recognized patents?
And another one that's I'm a second author on that's in cybersecurity that is patented in the United States,
Wow.
Japan, and the European Union. So that's kind of cool to have it in multiple locations as
super
well.
cool.
I'm also a licensed professional engineer in the area of control systems, and my specialty is in uh, dynamic operations. So if you have a machine that's running and something happens where you're having thermal things happening and you've got lots of rates of change, then what do you do to bring the systems back into control? That's where I really get excited to watch that. As you're spinning all the plates on the stick, so to speak, that everything's going on at once. How do you keep everything in control so that the system as a whole stays together? So that's my background, and I can show you why I noticed some of the things in the data from the elections that are reminiscent of my work in control systems rather than you would see in random behavior of, what you would see people voting over time in the elections.
Awesome. And that kind of gets into what we wanted to talk about, because we wanted to know, we know that you have seen evidence of manipulation from the numbers, but we wanted to get an understanding of how you can tell. So is that in part of your PowerPoint here?
That I did. I provided the PowerPoint with some things, but I wanted to talk. Let me just take a second
Yeah.
to talk about some of the things that I don't think people realize, that what they're seeing right in front of them is evidence of manipulation. So we see the evidence of the white truck showing up with the ballots. We see suitcases. We've seen the reports from Georgia of people scanning mail-in ballots that were in pristine condition and folded flat. Now, if you were to be a bad guy and you wanted to control an election, and you had the ability to have uh, fake people on your voter rolls, whether they were, um, you know, clones. We've seen a lot of that, where you would be on the voter roll and then all of a sudden another voter ID with your same name and a slightly different address or something, or a slightly different name would show up as a duplicate. One of the reasons that we get the reports of people getting, say, 6 or 7 copies of mail-in ballots in the mail, maybe they're going to different voter IDs that are all under the same names in the clones. That's a benefit, because then if you move away or you die, your proper name is pulled off of the voter rolls, but all of your clones stay to do whatever they're going to do. So we see all of these things in the voter rolls. We see all of these extra mail-in ballots. If you have that structure in place, just by having that in place, you are seeing evidence of the ability to manipulate. The reason is that if I was a bad guy and I had access to that, all I would have to do is fill out tons of ballots that are 50-50. So we're voting for both sides. But what that does is, let's say you and 10 of your best friends are going to vote on what you want to have for lunch, and somebody wants to order subs and somebody wants to order pizza, and you take a vote, and you have 8 people vote for the pizza, and then you have 3 people vote for the subs. Well, the pizza is an overwhelming popular decision, right? And that shows the opinion of the people in the group. Now, if you have a bunch of ballots show up, let's say you have 20 ballots show up with your friends voting by mail, and they are 50-50. Now, when you divide that up, now you've got 8 plus 10 and 3 is 10, and that takes and changes your total score to 18-13. You're no longer 8-3, you're 18-13. That methodology is what we see time and time again that moves us to that 51-49.
Wow.
That's why all these votes that end up being so close, and then the last person wins just at the last minute. That's even before we get into any machine manipulation.
Right.
So when we look at all of these things that we see, when you put it together as a system of how they would all function together, it becomes more and more apparent of how these can produce the results that we're actually seeing, which is what you do in engineering. You're doing like what we call root cause analysis. Let's say you have something happen and it wasn't expected. You go back through the steps and find out what happened that allowed that final result to be the case, right?
Yeah.
And so many times we see people saying, well, it wasn't enough to switch the election. Well, depending upon how you apply it and where it's going on, possibly it is.
Wow.
Yeah. Draza, I think most conservatives have a problem with the ballot harvesting and on all the mail-in ballots. But I find the biggest divide between among Republicans is the algorithmic manipulations inside of the computer systems. So apart from the mail-in ballots, are you confident that not only that computers are vulnerable to that type of manipulation, where votes can be switched back, malware can be implanted, but that it has actually occurred? And how?
The results that we've seen, I don't believe lead you to any other any. If you actually study the data, if you look at things from an auditing perspective, then I don't know how you would be able to come to any other conclusion. The problem is that our elections are um, isolated because you have one election every year. If you're looking at special elections, every 4 years, if we're looking at the presidential elections, and then people may compare county to county, but rarely do they compare state to state. Those of us that have been doing large scale analysis on the overall structures, when you see the same machines being used in different states with different profiles of their overall um, political alignment, what happens is you see that the process, the path that they walk from start to finish, takes on very standard shapes. And it's kind of like if you have a sunflower seed and you plant the flower seed and you plant a sunflower seed right next to it. They're not the same plant, but you can tell how far along they are in the germination process by when you see the roots start coming out of the seed case, or when you see the first leaf coming off. And the first leaf looks very different than if it was a seed from another plant. But we're seeing those, and if you have one that you're watering a lot and giving it sunlight, it may grow bigger, but you'll see the same shape. You'll see the same number of first leaves come out and everything else. So what we're seeing is we're seeing kind of that. You may see this plant over here growing bigger, which indicates that it's a you know alien bee preference, right? And you see this one that's being a little smaller, which means that it's alien preference. But the fact is that the process that it goes through to reach the adult state follows a set path that we watch happen over time. And that's what we see in the data of the elections from start to finish. I don't know if that makes a whole lot of sense, but I can show you with some of the charts in the slides that I have.
Just to clarify, just for a minute, you're saying that obviously, different states have different political views.
Mhm.
Vermont is not going to have the same political ideology as a whole, the people, as Louisiana or Georgia is. And are you saying that when you compare the machine, the computer state by state, are you suggesting that the people who are manipulating the algorithms are careful not to make it look obvious that things are being manipulated in the more conservative states? Is that I'm trying to figure out where we're going here.
So I worked at Sandia National Labs in bridge security, and I've worked in security for power plant systems. I wouldn't consider that my biggest forte as compared to control, but I'm probably better than the average there. And when what I'm saying is that when I look at this, if I can identify the fact that the path that the votes take over time, how the ratio of who's winning, follows as we go from 0 to 100%, and that ends up looking like Vermont, except that one's more Republican and one's more Democrat, but they're walking the same paths. That shows some sort of external control that we're going through a process. Now, when you say that we don't want it to look like we're controlling the conservative states, if I can control one, why would I not control all of them? Honestly, if you're a bad guy and you have the ability to control, why would you leave anybody up to a random outcome that could affect your overall control.
You still do. They just wear
yeah.
different badges, right? I mean, they're wearing the R badge with the red sticker around
Well,
it, but they're a big uniparty member, regardless of whether, they are in Vermont, or if they're in Louisiana. I think that's exactly why I think the primary system has been hijacked by this exact thing, as well as the general elections, and we're seeing that good candidates, perhaps like honest candidates, can't make it through the process, and that's why we continue, or they're far less likely, in my opinion, to make it through the process for this reason.
if I have the ability to control a single state through manipulation, external hacking due to weak security practice in our systems, or any other aspect, why would I not control all of them in a single election to come up to a proper result?
Yeah.
If I have the ability to control them in one election, regardless of whether it's general, primary, etc., why would I have the ability to control them in all?
And Draza,
Yeah.
this randomly came to mind when you were talking about the sunflower seeds growing. Do you happen to know what state instituted the machines first? Was it Florida because of the hanging Chad incident, whatever you want to call that, op, or was
I
it
do
somewhere else?
not.
It'd be a good
I
thing
do
for us to
not
look at.
know. Yeah, I do not. I do not know where they came in. I do know that they came in very rapidly, all at the same time as the result of that. And Colonel Reynolds has been sharing a video that Dan Rabbit, which is very, very interesting, from people that worked at the system that made the paper that were used in the punch cards, and how they think that that might have been a setup to intentionally cause that system to fail, which would be much, much more difficult to manipulate than the current system that we have in place.
Yeah.
Wow.
Draza, I just want to make sure that I'm clear and understand what we're talking about here. So let's just say you're watching election results from multiple states, electronic results that are coming in throughout the evening. You have your graph, diagram, whatever it is that you look at that shows the votes coming in, increase, decrease, whatever. You're saying that you're able to look at the electronic results as they're coming in and be able to tell by the trajectory of the votes, the ebb and flow, that things are being controlled or manipulated and not random?
Well, what I can tell. So, one of the things that I started doing is I started looking at the election results as 0 to 100% of the votes, and just let's throw away how many votes there actually are, and just say we're from 0 to 100%, whether you're counting 5,000 people in a county or 500,000 people count. And what I have seen, I did a study on Maryland's 2024 election, and it's very, very obvious that once you hit around 75-80% of the vote, you start seeing the very same shape where it goes from a Trump favoritism dropping in almost the same shape, a parabola down towards a Harris preference in the 2024 election. So why would every single county, regardless of whether they're 25,000 people, 50,000 people, why would they all, when they got to 80% of the vote, how would people in that county know that they were at 80% of the vote to start voting highly Harris in order to shift that total ratio?
Yeah.
That's so interesting. And I watched recently an interview you did a couple months back with Joe Hoft, and y'all were talking about. I mean, your conversation was an excellent one, because I know he has an audit mind, and you're coming from this as a systems person as well, and so y'all are kind of the experts in this. But you did talk about how there was you could detect the difference between human behavior and a program. Would you talk about that a little bit?
It's not always 100%. And that's very, very, very difficult. But when when you see people coming in and expressing their opinions, then we we don't really care how many people voted before us. We don't really care how many people there are in line behind us. That should not affect how we cast our vote. But at this stage, in looking at the cast vote records, which I have a slide to discuss what that is, but when we look at the cast vote records, which is an audit of how the votes come in over time to aggregate to the total vote count, most people focus on those final numbers, just the final numbers, and look at the final numbers and the ratio of Republicans that turned out and Democrats that turned out. But when you look at how they aggregate over time, um, Ed Solomon has shown some really, really interesting data that uh, when you look, say, at only people, he's done a lot of work where he will take and split the votes by presumed vote intention, especially in a presidential election, where he'll take the votes and split them into two stacks: the people that voted for Trump and the people that voted for Harris or Biden, depending upon the election that he was looking at. And then he will analyze the down ballot races of only those votes. So we're not mixing people that have differing opinions on the presidential race. So these people should be more closely aligned in their views. And yet he will still see shifts where the preference for topics that should be partisan, abortion issues and property taxes and things like that, it will depend on where you are in the percent count of the race as to how many people are voting for and against that, even when you're only looking at presumed partisan groups.
That's so
So
interesting, Draza.
that should not be how humans are voting.
That's so
And that's
interesting
what's
to me.
being
In other
confirmed.
words, what you're saying is that it's that's so interesting to me that you're saying that you know, all 20% of the voters who go vote are going to wait until 80% of the people have voted to go vote, and then the last 20% are going to be all basically liberals that go vote. Throughout in Maryland, you're saying in every county. That's like me saying, I mean, I'm from Shreveport, from North Louisiana, which is much more conservative than say New Orleans. And you're saying if you were looking at Caddo Parish and also Orleans Parish, let's say in Louisiana, just applying the Maryland situation, and after 80% of the votes have come in, you see this for Trump. You see this substantial shift in both parishes for toward
Right.
Harris.
Right.
And
And
I
that's how you see the effect that we're all so tired of seeing, where it looks like the person who the people think should win suddenly in the surprise horse race falls behind and the other one wins by a nose. Sorry, better luck next time, just vote harder.
It just seems
Really?
Vote
so
harder.
unnatural. It seems so unnatural and not organic in the way people behave. Unless, like I said, everybody gets together, all the voters get together hypothetically on election day and say, okay, look, all the conservatives are going to go vote between 6 o'clock in the morning and 4:30 in the afternoon. And once you people go vote, and then we, the liberals, are going to go and we're going to go vote.
Yeah,
And
that's
we'll
when
we'll
the
pull it
10,
out for the
30
liberals.
buses show up. 10 to 30 buses just show up and dump people off.
And that's not
The,
how
th- the
people
thing
No.
behave.
the thing that you need to consider as well, I treat the cast vote record, which you can, it makes sense to do this as a time series, so that the first vote counted may not have a timestamp, but whatever timestamp it happened would be before the timestamp of the second vote that came in, right? So we don't have what's called a deterministic timestamp that we can say what time blocks, like you mentioned, that this was
Sure.
happening. And so, therefore, when we're counting a bunch of mail in ballots, when we're counting people voting early, voting in person, that's where it didn't matter whether they were the last mail in votes that were counted or the last people that came in and voted. It was still the last 20%.
Yeah.
So, that adds to the concern for someone evaluating whether this was unmanipulated result.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Draza, I know you're not. I know you're not a lawyer. You're a technical computer person. But let me ask you this: one of the things people say is, well, all these lawsuits from 2020, these lawsuits were dismissed, and it's so there couldn't have been any election fraud. Our position has always been that the cases were dismissed before the evidence was really allowed to be heard. In those
Right.
cases regarding electronic manipulation, what do you say about that? And do you think that if given a real opportunity in court to present the evidence of fraud in an objective way with an objective judge, you think you could be successful there?
I could answer that by telling you the reason Tina Peters is in jail is because she was not allowed to present a defense.
Yeah.
The cases that came up with election fraud, they've frequently been thrown out on standing, and I think it's a very poor interpretation of a law that came about during the fallout of the Vietnam War, where people tried to sue Congress for spending taxpayers' money to go to a war that they didn't want. And the decision, I might say this wrong, so if I'm wrong and people in the legal community can correct me, forgive me, but I believe my understanding is the decision came down that if everybody was hurt equally, then nobody has standing to sue because everybody was hurt. And that's the justification that has
It's
been
insane.
used to throw out the individuals not having standing to sue when everybody is damaged the same if election fraud actually exists.
Yeah. In other words, you don't have an individualized, uh, particularized, whatever language they use,
Damage.
claim,
Yeah.
damage claim that is unique to you. Everyone was equally damaged. Therefore, there really isn't any relief for anybody other than political relief at the ballot box when the whole thing we're challenging is the irregularity in the very process that we choose our elected officials. But I,
Which
I
is a
never quite
horrible
could
circular
understand that.
argument.
Yeah.
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 Horrible circular argument in that.
Yeah.
Draza, when you first came on, and it may have been before we got on air, you were mentioning that you've spent some time in Louisiana. You testified, I believe, before our legislature when then Secretary of State Kyle Ardoin was looking at purchasing some new machines. Louisiana has been dogged in its pursuit of new machines from the Secretary of State's office, despite, I would say, very strong opposition from the people. One of the main things that we, Chris's group, LaCag, and many others across the state have complained about is, look, President Trump is over here saying that he wants paper ballots. DNI Gabbard is over here saying that our elections are manipulated, or at least manipulatable, and they're not secure, and we should go to paper ballots. And so our Secretary of State has selective hearing, as it turns out, and she believes that a paper component is the same thing as a paper ballot, which in my view, it's pretty obvious those cannot be the same thing. But what would you say to our Secretary of State if you were testifying right now about the machines and the fact that it's okay because what we're doing is, in her view, moving from a non-auditable system with no paper trail to an auditable system because it spits out a receipt?
You're not. You're not moving to an auditable system. The problem with that is that any claim that the systems are auditable is unfounded when it comes to the actual processes in place by states that are using these systems. Just look at Georgia. Georgia has a lawsuit in place where they've been requesting their paper ballots to compare against the actual results, and years are going by and they're not allowed to look at them.
Yeah.
When you go into your own county and you ask to do any sort of audits, they tell you you can audit against the ballot images, which are again computerized files, which could also be manipulated, easily be manipulated to match the final results. So it's more of a magic trick where the magician allows you to inspect the hat after he pulled the rabbit out of it, but you missed the part of where the rabbit was hidden inside of it to produce it in the first place, and it wasn't real magic. The issues with those claims are the risk limiting audits, the lack of the ability for people to have access to the paper in the future, the excited nature that people seem to have that when their time limit expires that they're allowed to destroy those papers without anybody being able to look at it. The fact that we had a Maricopa County audit, and when the auditors received the box, many of the boxes had the security tags removed and were already opened when they arrived. So the chain of custody had been broken on those paper ballots. Time and time again, you see these cases. In any other case, if you were auditing something for a bank, if you were auditing something for any other industry, and the start of the audit had started off like that with all of your information and lost chain of custody, the audit would have failed right there. There would have been no continued counting. There would not have been the ability to say, well, it matches everything that's here, because you don't have any faith that what was there was the actual initial state after the election.
Yeah. Does in this paper component that our Secretary of State is talking about, assuming there was no issue with the custody, assuming the paper receipt or component could be kept intact, do the paper components themselves accurately reflect the vote that the voter made, or could the paper components themselves be spitting out something that is not consistent with what is occurring inside of the computer? Because the reason why I'm asking, Draza, is that 90% of voters, the vast majority of voters, even though, as you said, they can't leave the precinct with their ballot, they have to leave it there. But most people don't even look at their ballot when it comes out, a very small percentage. And so my question is, if there was a situation where you had to go back and do some kind of an audit there, and assuming that all the paper components were in order, in place, is there a 100% guarantee that those are accurate?
You can't have an 100% guarantee when you have the ability to do a thought experiment and see where vulnerabilities exist. Where um, I do a lot of work with protecting systems in the electrical field, and part of what I do when I evaluate the security of them is I first have to, as someone I dearly love said, flip my evil bit. And for just a moment, I'm not a defender, I'm an attacker. And I have to look at what are all the ways that the system could be manipulated. And that's how I develop my framework of where I need to build my defenses. So when we're looking at these systems, if I was a bad guy, I've seen some of these companies saying that, well, we're building tabulators now that mark the ballots with a mark as it goes through the scanner, so that it says like already been read so that you can't double scan it. Once you have the ability for the tabulators to be printing at the same time that they're scanning, what's to stop them from printing in bubbles, turning good votes into overvotes that are now thrown out so that you fill in the bubbles for both candidates, filling in bubbles where people didn't vote in down ballot elections to be able to manipulate them. Whether or not the company themselves would be doing it, it would be open for someone to easily manipulate it in that manner. If I can easily think of that type of situation where I could affect in a very secretive, um, uh, invisible to the person during the election process, and then auditable to show the results, because now when I count the ballots, the number of votes that have overvotes matches.
Yeah.
But that was not the intent of the voter. If I can come up with that as a very quick thought experiment, I don't know how you could say that if we had really smart people sitting for a long time that they wouldn't come up with a whole lot more that would then show you that the systems, once you put that paper into a system that allows for computational manipulation that you as the voter lose control.
Yeah.
Draza, could you tell us or show us what you found in Louisiana? Because I am very curious to know what it is you've uncovered through your research.
Sure, I sent you some slides. If you could you show them?
Yeah,
I'm not as
I can
very I'm
show.
not as
Yeah,
good as doing the presentation.
let's see. Um, okay. Well,
I like showing graphs because graphs speak to me. I have
there we
discovered
go.
doing this that not a lot of people have the same love of graphs. So I'm going to walk through some stuff here at the beginning to get you to understand that based on my work and what I do, why I have seen the things that I have seen and the claims that I have made and the results of what we're seeing. So if you could go to the first slide there. So when I work in industrial control, we have controllers in all kinds of equipment. If you have a fridge, let's say that this was a refrigerator and that value on the side, on the left hand side that says SV, that's my set point value, and that's how cold I want my fridge to be.
Okay.
That I can put in a controller that isn't very precise, that'll get close to it, like in the first slide, and then stop adjusting. I can put in a more precise controller that gets closer to that set point, but still is a little cold. Or I can put in a controller that goes and overshoots a little bit and oscillates my temperature, turning on and off my compressor so that we go around that set point and everything on average stays close to what the temperature I want my refrigerator to be at. And we work when we design the control systems, we design the software to be able to produce these results, whether it's controlling your refrigerator or controlling the speed in your um, uh, uh, cruise control in your car, or anywhere where you put a set point in. We design these kind of systems. This one is just a proportional controller where it looks at how far you are away from your set point and then makes a proportional adjustment to the system to get you back to where that set point should be. If you go to the next slide, there's a more advanced control where you have an integral controller that takes into account how far you are away from that set point and kicks the system harder when you have a further way to go and slows it down as you approach the set point and therefore provides you a faster response to get to that set point. You don't have to wait for the system to slide in. And when we have a proportional controller that you see in that B side, you can see where that proportional control kicks in and tries to push us closer to that set point so our fridge is going to get colder faster, right?
Okay.
So these are the kind of shapes that when I look at the system analysis over time, I can see how my systems are responding based on the math that is in the actual control system of what I'm trying to achieve as a result of the machine that I'm programming to a set output. Okay? So the data that I've been able to get for the elections, for the most part, if you go to the next slide, in 2020, we were able to get one cast vote record. The cast vote record. Oh, this it doesn't. It made very clear. But the cast vote record is just a table, like a sample of here is shown, where we have the CVR number, the ballot in order it's cast, right? The second column is the tabula that ballot went through, and then which precinct it was from. You can see there's no identifying data in any of these columns that show who the actual voter was, when the vote was cast. You just have what we call metadata that describes the ballot to be able to see how the election stacked up over time. The last two columns show the vote for the president. First column is Biden, and if that bubble was filled in, it got a 1. The second column is Trump, and if that one was filled in, received a 1. And then you can see anyone that has a 1 in one column should have a 0 in the other one, or that would be considered an overvote. Any of them, like the fifth, 1, 2, 3, fourth line down that has a 0 in vote, means that somebody voted for a third party candidate that I didn't include in this slide. So this is the idea of the data that I've been working with. And if you go to the next slide, this is my best example of the way that I look at the data over time. So if you had a marble that, let's say, the Biden votes were going on one side of the scale and the Trump votes were going on the other side of the scale, then that middle pin that's going over that gauge in the center would move back and forth over time as you put the marbles in each side of the pan, right? So what I do is I do a plot that is basically for every single vote as it's cast, how does that needle tip move as we add the next vote? Okay. And that's called the cumulative ratio. So just understand that when we're looking at a cumulative ratio for something like this, Ouachita Parish, is that right?
Ouachita, yeah.
Ouachita only had about 23,000 voters. But still, when you think about it, let's say we're at 50% of the vote, and we've got 11,000 marbles roughly in these pans. Anytime you add another marble, the weight of the marbles that are already in the pan is going to be so overwhelming that those individual marbles shouldn't be able to move that cumulative ratio that much over time. That's what is normally described as the law of large numbers, and why we would see that the opinion should settle in over time for a standard, but that's not what we normally see.
Yeah.
So
in other words, the more marbles you have in one side, the less effect adding one marble is going to have to the aggregate.
To other side, exactly right. So, but the problem is that we see it just go crazy all throughout the whole election. It's fine. So, if you go to the next slide, so this is that result of the actual election, and this is how that needle moved as we went through 0 to 100% of the vote. Now, you can see the very first votes are very, very heavy towards Biden, and it goes down to a Biden win, because 100% would be 50-50. And so 70% means that there's 7 Biden votes for every 10 in that first 5% of the vote, which seems kind of odd. But then and this is only the early voting, by the way. The only CBR that we received did not include any in person, but I know that most of Louisiana votes we're looking at the majority of the votes when we're looking at early votes in Louisiana anyway. But then you see, after we get past 5% of the vote, we see a very rapid increase that has that shape that was very reminiscent of that curve when we saw that that integral controller that had that bump and curve that goes up to a set point. Then we see another section that once we get close to 250, which means that it's 25 Trump votes to every 10 Biden votes, we see a rapid decrease back down. That now that we've gotten to 20%, we have to rein everybody back in. And then once we get to 35%, we go back up. And then once we get to 45%, we come back down. Now, what I want to point out here is I put that red line in there. That has nothing to do with the election. But from my perspective, this is how a system would respond if we have a controller that is controlling around a set point, trying to make sure that we get our final value to hit that 150 or 15-1, 3-2 ratio as a result of the final county. If you go back to that second slide, the one before that. the one on the right that shows that
Yeah.
oscillating controller, that's very, very similar. And these are the kind of shapes that as a controller I saw in the actual results, which doesn't make a lot of sense when we start seeing that this is the way that the people should be voting. That depending upon whether you're a member of that, 20 to 35%, you're going to be voting very heavy Biden versus if you're voting from 5 to 20%, that
Yeah,
you're going to be
yeah.
exceptionally voting for Trump.
You
Okay,
know,
so if you go back to,
yeah.
sorry,
I
go
just
ahead.
find this interesting because it's not, it doesn't reflect any kind of a real pattern. At some point, a pattern has to develop that you can sort of observe and that is predictable. This is almost like it's deliberate manipulation. So we're going to give Biden a bunch of votes. Okay, we're pretty safe for now. So we'll come back down and let Trump come back a little bit, and then we'll go back up some more. Then come. This just there's nothing natural about what we're looking at here.
That has been my point, that if we go in and we look at the behavior of the people in each section of these, what is different about the people? And if you look at the Capitol record, they have the precincts within the parish all mixed in together. So it's not like this is the result of a single parish, a single precinct within the parish that would have a particular political differentiation from a different
Great
precinct.
point. Great point.
They're all mixed in together, and yet the people that are all mixed in together from all the precincts that chose to be part of that 20 to 35% of the vote, again, not the actual numbers of the vote, that they experience this rapid parabolic decline to we see as that final set point value. It's very indicative that once we hit that set point value, then we release, so to speak, that kind of control, and it's allowed to float back up and then is pushed back down. That's what I would see in a controller that's trying to control your car to a certain speed as you're going down a hill. We're going to be braking, and then we release it, and the gravity will pull it back up, and it'll brake again while you try to maintain that set point speed in the car.
Draza, an interesting point here to maybe note for you, and you may know this, but for early voting, Louisiana has these tablets now where you press, it's like basically, it almost looks like a video game, it's very simplistic. But our old system is what's used on election day pretty much only. And this is one of those Diebold systems, right, where it's really difficult to you see the paper, you see a paper ballot that outlines for you its input for every election. A different one is kind of slid in there, and they program it to have the vote correspond with the name on the paper. And I would imagine that perhaps a big push for early voting is what's led to this. And I would be very interested to see how the different machines have different outcomes because of the mechanisms for manipulation that are different between the two. Would you think they're probably different?
Are you saying that you can control people's behavior into two different options based on which option is less painful? I think that's true.
Hey, Draza, how would this is maybe a speculative question. I'm not sure, but how would this graph that we're looking at right here, these 23,000 Washita early voters, how would this look different if it was not being manipulated?
So what you would kind of expect is you would expect to see some, if you go back to thinking about those marbles in that pan scale, if you put the first marble in, the needle's going to go all the way over here, right?
Yeah.
And then put another marble on the other side, it'll go back to the middle. So you can swing 50% with each marble that you're putting in. But over time, as you take and add those marbles in, that impact of every single one of those marbles would be less and less over time. So once you're at 70%, actually what's really interesting is that last like 8% here, you've got you've got all of these marbles that are in the pan, up to like 20,000 marbles in the pan, and they're split out to be, like 16 to 10. And all of a sudden, the very last votes come in are so preferential on the side that they can actually move the cumulative ratio so that that needle on the scale keeps going in the Biden direction. That's kind of interesting that once you have that mass, that momentum of mass, that the tiny little marbles of the votes on the very end can actually result in an actual physical movement of the overall ratio. Those last people actually had enough cohesiveness in their vote opinions to move the opinions of everyone else in the county. And that's not something that I would really expect to see, and yet we see that time and time again.
Yeah. Have you, and did you say Ouachita County or parish in Louisiana? That was the only place from which you were able to secure cast vote records?
Yes, yes. Someone wonderful in Louisiana actually paid the money that they were asking, and we were able to get a copy that they generously shared with people that wanted to do analysis on it. And then the state decided that cast vote records should not be provided any longer. But I really don't understand why certain states have said that they won't supply the cast vote records. Cast vote records were developed as an auditing tool based on a NIST standard that the machines have to produce. And as you saw from the data that was provided, there's nothing that identifies the individual that was casting the votes. It just shows how the election stacked up over time.
Well,
Yeah.
I can tell you that our Secretary of State's office is doing basically anything and everything they can to obstruct the people from knowing what's really going on or from having their voice heard in the process. So it's not surprising to me that they would do that after, I don't know how much, do you remember, Chris, how much this cost? I know there's someone that,
Oh,
I think it was like, was it $300,000 or something?
an
I mean,
enormous amount of money.
complete robbery, complete and
Yeah.
utter robbery.
Yeah. An enormous amount of
Wow.
money, Danielle.
Yeah.
Um,
Wow.
Draza, this before we go on to something else, because we definitely want to talk to you about Act Blue and a couple of other things here. But what do you make of the idea that the system vendors, the manufacturers, are the only people who are allowed access to their source codes, and nobody else is really allowed to look at that? Uh, Number one, and secondly, what do you think you would find if you were given unfettered access to the source code inside of these systems?
I don't know exactly how to answer. Okay, so the first part of your question is I don't like it all when we have code that is for something to do with our critical infrastructure that you do not have an independent verifier. Maybe don't open it up to everybody. Maybe with something as simple as counting the votes, 1, 2, 3. I don't see why it shouldn't be. But if they want to hide behind IP and they're a private company, one, that raises the question, why are private companies allowed to be the controllers of our public elections? But the second thing would be that anyone who has code hires independent uh, auditors and verifiers to walk through the code and do a full analysis, and do an independent verification that what you're doing. We would never want to have software that controls um, safety or other other life aspects that wasn't independently verified by people. When you're doing your own work and you're checking your own work, you get that tunnel vision. You make assumptions that you did that right, but that's why the troubleshooting takes so long when you're writing a code, because you have to go back and figure out where that thing that you knew was right, where you actually had the coding error in it. And you miss that if you don't have somebody independently verifying it.
Yeah.
And then you have the additional problem of what actually is put into the machine, even if somebody else is allowed to independently verify the code, because software is so malleable. that even if the vendors were being 100% honest, that who could modify that code. If you into the solar winds hack, which maybe people are very familiar with,
Yeah.
the solar winds hack was a result of supply chain infiltration, where the hackers were able to get into the code development and put the back door into the actual code. So when people were doing real work and real updates on their system, they were just putting the tools in to take over filtration of data from all kinds of systems, including our governmental systems. If that could happen there, I don't understand why we would trust that it wouldn't happen in an election system.
And
Yeah.
Draza, would you also speak to the threat of AI when it comes to our election infrastructure and software? Because what you have to say about it is absolutely terrifying.
I was just talking about this. I've been looking for it. I saw an article and a presentation earlier in the year where people were talking about the ability to develop malware now on top of an AI engine. So where our systems now, we feel protected by these companies that we pay our very good money to, the McAfee's and the Nortons and everybody. And what they do is they have a library of blacklisted uh, malware codes that have fingerprints essentially, that when they detect those fingerprints, they quarantine the files or they block those files, and and then they don't allow that to impact your system. But back in March, I think someone wrote a very interesting paper about building building a malware product that's built on an AI engine, that you give instructions to be able to change its own code in the vein of genetic algorithms, where genetic algorithms are used to produce code that is slightly different but produces the same output for different reasons, looking for optimal throughput or using different portions of an FPGA chip or things like that. You end up with multiple forms of code that still produces the same output and um, the same results that you're going for with the code that you're running. So that would just wreak havoc on anybody that's currently doing the standard fingerprint type analysis of malware attacks on our computational systems. And I saw just a couple weeks ago that the first fully functional version that they have labeled prompt lock was discovered by an engineer at ESET that um, is built on OpenAI's AI framework to be able to do that, rewrite its own code, automatically modify your log files, do whatever it needs to be doing while it's in there doing whatever sneaky thing it's being programmed to do as a final outcome. Our our systems in general are not prepared for that. And our election systems, if we stay computational, are definitely not programmed for that. We have one system now that they have been touting that actually meets the VVSG 2.0, the voluntary guidelines for security as put forth by the EAC. And those are already 4 years old before the first system was even being able to meet those. And the criteria within that structure is woefully behind the times to be able to stand up to something like this.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know the name of the system that is the one that is the VV whatever you said? The
I believe that was the Heart Inner Civic model.
Okay.
But I don't know how. I don't have insight. Someone who's more of an expert like Clay Tariq would have better insight into what the actual testing and criteria was achieved to get that certification. I don't have that level of insight into it, but I do know that they've been touting that that one did pass whatever bar they set for meeting that criteria.
But it's at best 4 to 6 years out of date when it comes to dealing with any kind of hackability or
Right, right.
yeah,
Which in computer world is, decades.
it
So.
is
Yeah.
decades. Yeah.
So there's no difference, Draza, in your view, one electronic system to another as far as security?
No, no. And one of the things also that I think that and I'm going to go off on a tangent in my own personal view of the world is that part of our problem in not understanding our results is that we're losing more and more our sense of community. We don't have a good feeling of all the people in our community and their opinions to be able to say, okay, which one of my crazy neighbors voted for this, right? We
Mm-hmm.
just have to go, oh my gosh, there's a bunch of people around here that really feel that way. So in addition to, I mean, I've said for a long time now, we should take all that money that your Secretary of State wants to spend, give it to the individual precincts, buy a big dinner from a local restaurant to put the money back into the community and have everybody come over, get a free meal, hand cast your votes, and everybody count it together and build a sense of community around the election holiday. I think that would be a much better solution, all in all, for so many reasons.
Yeah.
But when you introduce the the machinery in the middle there, you lose so many of the aspects that the system that I just described would engender among the community.
Yeah. I want to switch gears for a second here, Draws, in the little time we have left here. Someone put a post up. I don't know why I don't have her name here. Anyway, recognizing you for doing excellent work in collecting and analyzing FEC data and essentially exposing the international financial scam regarding Act Blue. Can you talk to us a little bit about the Act Blue scam regarding all of these, I'm assuming Smurf donations?
That is some crazy stuff. That is some crazy stuff. The first person that mentioned that to me was a brilliant lady in New Mexico, and she was like, the donations that are coming in are crazy, and she called it the death of our republic by $12.50 a pop.
Wow.
And then other people like Chris Gleason and Peter Berniger got into it, and they really just jumped into it as well because uh, the the financial aspect makes so much sense to people than the analytical data that I was just talking about on the charts.
Yeah.
They're both impactful, but you can understand, right? If we go back to the idea, like this, one of the stories that I heard was that when people have been videotaped um, bringing handfuls of mail-in ballots and putting them in drop boxes. I've heard some people say that they were given like $10 a ballot in order to do this. So if they're given $10 a ballot, where are they getting the ballots from and who's paying them those $10 a ballot? So when you look at what we're seeing in the FEC data, and it's been a lot of abuse of retired people, of people that are unemployed. I think that that was intentional so that you don't have any conflict of interest with an enlisted employer per se. But people showing donations of making $12.50 donations or $2.50 donations, five 500 times a day to 400 different committees and commissions. And I mean, how do you even decide 800 of the committees and commissions are worth your $2.50 that you're donating to that one? It was just, and it was, once we started digging into the data, it was absolutely ridiculous how it was spread out. And the continued work that's been done now, the House Oversight Committee just issued a 700-page report that if you want to just have your mind blown, just go to the House Oversight Committee and look up the actual BC report, and you can see all the things that they have found that there's no guarantee that this money was coming from American sources, which means the possibility of foreign money being put in through activities like buying foreign gift cards. They were accepting foreign gift cards. They were accepting prepaid Visa cards and not using the CVV number for validation, lowering the SIF score, so that which is what the banks use to detect fraud. So many things that were actively put in place to not catch anything that could have been questionable. And they're not the only ones that are doing it.
Yeah.
They're just the worst. They're the worst participant. There are other companies that collect money for Democratic causes, for Republican causes, that both have earmarks of this as well.
Yeah.
So you have really what is a huge money laundering operation here, whereby these nefarious sources with lots of money are pretending as though or acting as though these elderly or retired or unemployed Americans are actually the ones making all of these donations, when in reality, they're not making these donations.
Right, right. People that have gone out and actually interviewed the people, they say, no, I'm not doing that. And some of the people, I saw an interview with one lady, I believe, during one of James O'Keefe's interviews, where he went out and spoke to people. And the lady was quite honest. She was like, if I had the money, I would be, which, is fine. If you have your political
Yeah.
bends and you want to support all these campaigns, but then do it. But she also said she didn't, as a retired individual, she didn't have that amount of money, and that the money reported was not there. And that actually lends itself to an additional issue that I thought of, because you're actually conscripting really good, uh, willing almost victims from people. Because if you find someone, say, who is listed as retired, who makes one or two donations to a Democrat or Republican cause, if you then use their name in this reverse, identity theft kind of operation, and you make continued donations in the areas that they would support if they had the money to do so, even if they notice it, would they complain? So without people doing independent investigation to see the scope of it, it was going on for quite a while.
Yeah.
And Draza, another point on that is, do the candidates even know this is happening? Because they're raising a lot of money. It's small amounts. I mean, a lot of them probably aren't even looking at their campaign donation records, right? They have like a treasurer that does, I don't know the level of direct culpability the actual candidate has. There's something larger at work, in my view. And the other piece of this is, all of this money is coming in, and it helps to create the illusion of popularity for a candidate that nobody wants, or that's not the true winner of the race.
Not only that, but the other rules have been structured. When Tulsi Gabbard, who I think she's awesome, when she was running for president, if you recall, she was not allowed to be on the stage with the primary people in the Democratic Party for some of their final debates, which didn't necessarily reflect her personal um, popularity within the actual Democratic side. But they had rules in place that you had to have so much in donations, because it was federal. Those had to come from so many different states and everything else. So it was like, if you weren't receiving this kind of support through this manufactured structure, you would fall out of the donation structure they were defining as the criteria your campaign had to have in the show of support, in order for you to even be able to be involved in the debates, to further
Yeah.
your
And they're
popularity among your
manipulating
supporters.
and they're manipulating where the money's going, therefore indirectly controlling who gets to be on the stage and who doesn't.
Correct.
Any inkling of who's behind it? Is it the parties themselves? I mean, obviously the parties must be a party to it, because they created the rules that follow the money. Or does the money follow the rules?
The amount of money that is coming in is on the order of billions, when you add up the death of America by $12.50 a pop.
Yeah.
Huge amount of money coming into campaigns, and I don't have insight. I've heard people that I trust say certain things, but I don't have the insight to give you my own personal evaluation as a good engineer of actually evaluating the data to say where
Yeah.
that is actually coming from and if the candidates know that it's happening.
Yeah.
Hey, what about how would you compare this to Act Blue to Win Red on the Republican side?
The earmarks are there. The earmarks are there. The magnitude is hugely different, though, and without having a better understanding of the machinations behind, like, just like all the questions you were asking are all the questions that I was asking as well. Who's doing it? Who's making the decisions?
Yeah.
How are we deciding that this particular campaign is today is the day that 50,000 people are going to donate $25 to this candidate? Who's making those decisions
Right.
that are some of the earmarks that we see in the data?
And where's the
For
money
what
actually
purpose?
coming from, as you said, Draza?
Where's the
Where's
money
the money
actually
actually
coming?
coming from?
Where's the money actually coming from? The amount of um, I am I have my own concerns of the people that want to see our elections manipulated. That it would have be coming in from countries that don't necessarily have our best interests at heart. We saw other types of manipulation, like the FBI releasing the data that China was importing the fake IDs to
Yeah.
support fake ballots
Yep.
and things like that. Whenever you see, again, like I was saying before, when people say, well, it wasn't enough to change the election, when you add up all of the aspects of everything that's going along, that this little bit by this entity, this little bit by this entity, this little bit by this entity, you end up looking, like all full of errors.
It's
Yeah.
just extraordinary. I mean, the total lack of transparency, the duplicity of it. I think the only thing that's probably keeping many of these people, good Americans, from, you know, going crazy over this and really, really getting very upset about the whole thing is the fact that it's not actually their money. They're not actually making the donations. They're using their names and their identity, but it's not really their money. But I still think I would be pretty upset about this.
It should be so it's very, very funny that the FEC donations, all of the donations that you make to campaigns and committees through the political structure are not tax deductible. So with all these people showing all this money going through, it's not even like they're able to take tax deductions on these donations like if you were donating it to a charity. So when people see this is actual money that they can see that's going to causes that they may support that are outside of their ability to support. And they wouldn't be necessarily as upset in that regard. I would be upset about people putting money, in my opinion, into anything, but I haven't
Well,
seen
you're
anybody
saying
do the
because you
same
have to,
thing.
they could get in and have some problems if it's believed that it's actually them making these donations as far as taxes.
Well, when you're in the retired sector, that
Well, that's
becomes a
true.
little
That's a good
less,
point.
you know, a little.
Yeah,
What are you doing? You're pulling out of your Social Security money. You're pulling out of your retirement money that you've already paid taxes on, et cetera.
that's a good
So
point.
that again, that's another reason that it was a lot of abuse for the people in the retired and unemployed sector.
Wow. That's incredible, Draza. I just appreciate you so much and thank you for walking us through this. I think for me the most revealing thing is what is happening through our early voting in Louisiana, because I truly believe that the early voting is perhaps more manipulated, or at least it's more manipulatable than these ancient machines that we're voting on. So if we could ever get our hands on a cast vote record from these ancient machines that we vote on the day of, love to get that to you so you could do a side by side of these two, because it's absolutely astounding what they're able to do with these tablets, and the technology is just ripe for fraud.
And
Yeah.
it's I have one of my very favorite quotes. One of my very favorite quotes is Isaac Asimov's any from the Foundation series. Any technology sufficiently advanced is indistinguishable from magic. So once we start putting so much technology into these simple processes, then it becomes indistinguishable from magic, and we have no understanding of how that person got into office or how the rabbit came out of the hat.
Yeah, absolutely true.
Danielle, do we have time to ask Draza briefly about this uh, audit in Pennsylvania?
Ask Draza if she has time. I don't know.
Draza, do you have a minute? I know that there was supposedly some audit or reexamination of some election results in Pennsylvania that was done
I
fairly
don't have a
recent.
lot of data currently. I
Okay.
don't have a lot of data currently on that. I did see the results. This is talking about the state Senate seat.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that became very, very interesting because when you look at the data, what it showed was that and Ed Solomon has an awful lot of evaluations that mathematically show how this has happened in other areas. But when you look at the results of this particular population and how they voted in the general election shortly before this, and then the special election for the state senator following this, there was an awful lot of what appears to be Republican voters that voted by mail that crossed party lines and put the Democratic state senator in office after everybody had just voted for Trump to put him in office as the president from this same area. So the processes that we have seen in play in order to produce an overall result, you have to take a little bit from every single part so that nobody ends up looking like the problem child. So if you are able to manipulate a small amount of votes every single day, a small amount of mail-in votes every single precinct, then everyone is now an inlier because they're all doing the exact same thing. We've got the same percentage of Republicans crossing over to support the Democratic candidate. However, when you think about people, if everybody's doing the same thing, that's a problem. Because if everybody is an exact inlier right on top of each other, that becomes problematic as one precinct being a significant outlier and is also indicative of some sort of manipulation.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad we got a chance to briefly ask you about that. Um, it is just extraordinary to me, Draza, the work that you have done to really, really, really dig down into this, and you know, and also to explain it in a way that is understandable. And you know, thank you so much for your work that you're doing.
Well, thank you so much. The math has been something that I've been able to contribute because I don't have the skills of people like you who speak so well and bring the voices out to the people. So I appreciate you doing what you do and our people that are fighting for the legal battles and all of us that have been working together to bring change to this very, very critical topic.
It's true. It's a real body of Christ moment, I believe.
No question about it. And I don't think you understand the impact you're having or the niche that you're filling. So God bless you moving forward, and we hope to get you back on soon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Draza. We'll be talking to you soon. Well, Chris, what do you say we go to a quick ad?
Yeah, let's go to our affiliate sponsors briefly, and I cannot wait to debrief this when we get back.
All right. Meet the world's first living, full-spectrum, certified organic CBDA hemp extract. Nessa's hemp oil was extracted from seed to bottle without chemicals, solvents, or heavy metals, and it surpasses world-class standards for purity. This pure and powerful CBDA has been proven to reduce aches and pains, ease mental tension, and promote better sleep. To get yours today, visit the Shop Our Partners page at freedomstate.us. All right. Well, what'd you think, Chris?
I think she's unbelievable. I mean, and it's such a technical area, but the way she explained it, the way she explained the graph, the way she explained sort of the artificial inputting of votes at various times, in order to ensure that the the threshold that they want, i.e., the result that they want at the end of the night, is achieved. The thing that strikes me most about her graphic is that after a period of time in any election, Danielle, you're going to start to see a pattern. The more votes that come in, you're going to start to see a pattern developing, and the discrepancies are going to get less and less. But on the graph we saw, it's like this, then down here, then a little bit, then it kind of goes even, then up here. It's like it's all over the place. It doesn't seem to be a natural progression of results.
Yeah.
And the other point that jumped out at me was the fact that how is it that the last 20% of the people who go vote in a given county or a given parish are all going and voting for the same guy
Right.
or the same lady in a race? It's like, did they all get together and say, okay, we're going to make sure that the last 20% of the votes here are going to be all for the Democrat? That makes no sense either.
Right. Well, I love that she brought up Ed Solomon. We had him on the show once, and he's been on For the Love of Freedom as well. And the way that he described it in the slides that he showed what it should look like and what it does look like. And what it should look like is much more of a scatter plot that kind of, as she talked about the scales balancing, kind of even out over time or settle down, as she talked about. Whereas what we're seeing is that kind of herky jerky
Yeah.
thing. And I mean, what a gift she is to the election integrity movement, and what an absolute gift it is that she had time for us as we're going through this process of looking at these machines. I think it's so important that we continue to bring on these expert voices who can speak into the fact that they are not only manipulatable, but they are actively changing the outcomes of our elections right now.
Yeah. And it's unfortunate and it's scary. And you really don't have to have the technical prowess that Draza Smith has or some of the others have in order to sort of know instinctively that this is not safe. This is not a safe process. And the only people who are continuing to push for this are the people who have a real institutional interest in continuing things exactly the way that they are right now. But
Yeah.
I'll tell you that, the vast majority of Louisianans and probably the vast majority of Americans fully understand how vulnerable this electronic system is. My 12-year-old Danielle, Jenin, and Eli, who's 17, they know how vulnerable computers are. They know
Yeah.
how cyber experts can hack into computers and manipulate things. It's like the only people who don't understand how vulnerable we are the professional politicians and the bureaucrats who want to maintain the current system.
Chris, I think an excellent test of this is how much they're listening to the people. If you believe that you were truly elected by the people, and you believe that the purpose of your role that you were truly elected to do is to serve the interest and the will of the people, would you listen to the people or would you not? And I think
Great question.
the people that we see who are listening to the people are probably ones that slipped through the machine's cracks and got through because the people were so supportive of them, they beat the algorithms or something. Because I have to tell you, by and large, the people that we are seeing in office in this state are people that are not listening to us.
Yes. And the flippancy and sort of the callous disregard for the will of the people is what I find most striking.
Yeah.
It's as though they know that they're not really vulnerable.
Yeah.
And how they know that, well, maybe there's a good reason for that as well. But I'm just thankful for Draza Smith and so many other Americans who understand how vulnerable our systems are. And of course, I'm very thankful to President Trump as well, Danielle, and Tulsi Gabbard for
Yeah.
continuing to sound the horn on this. There is not much more. Not many more places for the Nancy Landrys of the world and others to hide and to plead ignorance on this.
That's right. And if you want to see her in person, I believe you can see her this week and next week. The Horse and Pony Show of voting machine demonstrations is continuing at the old governor's mansion. It started today at 9 a.m. I believe it goes to noon, but you might want to double check me. This is the clear ballot, clear vote, and Thursday is ES&S, I believe, from 9 to noon. So go and make your displeasure known. Not that they're asking, but we
Right.
should voluntarily volunteer the information that we're against these voting machines. And
Amen.
and then tomorrow, same time, same place, Brad Zerbo will be joining me on For the Love of Freedom to talk about his absolutely outstanding documentary, Codex 9/11. Really looking forward to talking to him about that. It is his debunking of the traditional narrative of 9/11. He has done so much research to prove that what we were told was an absolute and utter lie, and absolutely impossible. So looking forward to talking to him tomorrow. And then we'll be back here on the State of Freedom on Thursday at 10 a.m. We are super excited. Trennis Evans will be joining us. He's part of Tina Peters' legal team. As you may know, September 11th is Thursday, and it is also Tina's 70th birthday. So we will be taking the opportunity to spotlight her case, to honor her and her bravery, and to get an update from Trennis on where her case stands. So
I cannot wait
I
for
know.
that. And keep praying for Tina Peters. This is
Yes,
such a gross miscarriage of justice that's occurring here. It's a situation that absolutely begs for justice. This is a
yes,
lady who simply was doing what she was legally bound to do to preserve the integrity of the elections in her state, and she's in prison because of it, because of sinister and criminal forces that conspired against her. It's going to be a wonderful day when she is released from that prison, hopefully to never, ever have to go back. And she will go down in history as an American hero. There's no question in my mind.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Danielle, God bless you as always. The state of freedom is moving on the march across the state of Louisiana, continuing to build, continuing to grow, continuing to build trust among Louisiana citizens as the voice of freedom and constitutional conservative, unapologetic and uncompromising. So I just want to say thanks to all of our listeners, supporters, and subscribers, and encourage everyone to let your family and friends know about the state of freedom, because we will not stop until we are the voice that you trust and go to as far as constitutional freedom, conservatism, and the protection of your liberty and your rights. That is why we are here. I know, I think I can speak for you, Danielle, when I say that we are called to do this. We're called to be here at this time, and we intend to be faithful to this call.
Amen, Chris. Well said. Absolutely well said. So grateful to be here with you, Chris. And also, please, just a reminder to support LACAG. LACAG is beating down the doors of all kinds of bad legislation during the legislative session, but they are still highly in action outside of session with tons of issues that come up. As you know, the carbon capture issue has been one, election integrity, another issue. The list would surprise you. The list would surprise you.
Yeah, yes, and you're in all likelihood, you're not going to hear it, at least the truth of it, from many of your elected representatives. You know, Danielle, I was in Forest Hill last night, which is right below Alexandria, and had to speak opportunity to speak to probably 115, 120 people who came out on a Monday night
Wow.
out of concern for this carbon capture sequestration racket here in our state. And I went through, a legislative briefing regarding the delegation that's from Forest Hill, the two reps and the senator from up there, a number of very critical votes, how they voted, what they did. And I love being transparent with voters. I love telling voters how your representatives and how your senators, good, bad, and ugly, are voting on an issue that is of profound importance to you. And here's the issue, and here were the votes. So that way, when they go to vote at reelection, they're
Yeah.
going to have the opportunity to make an informed choice that's based upon actual data, actual record votes, instead of simply relying on what their representative is coming back home and telling them. So I'm very humbly proud to be able to provide that service on behalf of LeCag to voters all over the state of Louisiana.
Yeah, and you do an excellent job of it. You're very faithful to the truth and to the facts, Chris. So thank you for that. I appreciate it,
Well,
and I know the
you wouldn't
folks.
have me. You wouldn't have me if I wasn't, and
That's
I
true.
certainly do not want to be one of your casualties.
That's true. I know the people of Forest Hills also really appreciated what you brought last night. So thanks for making the trip, and thanks for telling the truth, Chris.
You bet. And thanks to Bert Calais, who rode up with me, a great supporter of LeCag and just a great American.
Yeah.
Bert, if you can hear me, God bless you, sir. Love you.
All right. Have a great one, Chris. I'll see you back here on Thursday.